So what are the best mods for a daily driven car? So for most people, they have a car they use every day for the commute to work. They want a little bit more power. They want to have a little bit more fun with it. And the most common question that we get in our email box and in comments on the video is, I've got a limited budget. Where should I spend it? Where are the best improvements to my engine? So in this video, we're going to look at that question. What are the best mods for a daily driven car? And just discuss the merits of each of these and where you should best spend your money. There's obviously going to be a lot more complex mods that maybe affect the drivability or reliability of the car that are not going to be included in this video. So first up, you've got your car. Just make sure it is in good condition. Make sure the engine is putting out the power that it's meant to have. If there's some inherent fault, problem, issue or restriction in the engine that's preventing you from making stock power, it's pointless tuning it and trying to make more power. So that's your first thing, really, to run diagnostic checks, to check the cylinder compression and just to make sure the engine is in good condition. If it's not, invest your money in getting that engine up to spec, so at least you're making decent base power. Now, one mod that will make a difference to pretty much every car out there is tyres. Those 4 points of contact with the road, those rubber contact patches, are the thing that determines how well the car handles, how much power you can put down and how effectively you can put it down. It affects the cornering, the stability and the braking of the car. If those tyres are lacking, you've got a serious performance issue that needs to be addressed before you even start adding power to the car. Now, a lot of drivers will keep their tyres on their car until it reaches the minimum legal threshold. And leaving it that late usually means you have far less grip than those tyres were intended to do. So assuming a new tyre comes with about 8mm of tread depth, and legal restrictions in most countries is around about 1.6 to 2mm. If you're leaving your tyres to that 2mm level, you're going to be dramatically down on grip, particularly in the wet weather and under heavy cornering conditions. So I would strongly advise the viewers of our channel to replace their tyres before they hit those limits. So for me, that tends to be when there's about 3 to 4mm of tread depth left. If I'm going on a track day, I'd want to make sure there's a little bit more tread depth than that anyway. Your choice of tyre is critical. There's all different grades of rubber, there's different tread patterns, and there's tyres specially formulated for different conditions such as winter, summer, all-season tyres and snow and ice. So choosing the right tyre for the type of conditions you'll be using the car in is most effective, but we're talking about a daily driver. So for most people, a good all-season tyre will give the best performance in all those conditions. So next up, we start talking about power mods for your daily driver. So if you've got a turbocharged engine, and let's face it, most car manufacturers now are pushing out much smaller turbocharged engines for reasons of emissions regulations, so they can provide decent power but still meet those emissions regs. So with turbocharged engines, you've got basically a computer that controls everything that goes on in the engine, from the fueling, the turbo's wastegate, how it spools up, and also if it's a petrol or gasoline engine, the spark and the timing of the spark. So by altering those within the computer or tuning the engine, or we would call that remapping here in the UK, you can make significant power gains. So on most turbo vehicles, you'll get about 20 to 30% more power. If it's a diesel vehicle, you'll generally get about 30 to 40% more power. And if your car doesn't have a turbo, you'll still see about 10% more power by having the computer specially tuned or remapped. The key thing is not to look at the headline power figures, which is what most people look at. You really do need to look at the overall torque curve, and by remapping your engine, you will make it usually much more lively in those low RPM regions, which is where you use it mostly when you're driving the car every single day. So other things that can make the car feel much more sporty and improve your driver enjoyment is a short shifter. So that alters the distance you have to move the gear stick. This obviously only applies to manual gearboxes, which is pretty much most cars that are sold here in Europe, but I know in other countries like the US and Canada, and most of the cars seem to be automatics out there. But just by changing the throw that you have on the gear, you can make the car feel much more responsive, and that can actually improve the gear changes. It doesn't significantly affect the car's performance, but it improves your interface with the car as a driver, so you'll get much more response from the engine. So other things you might consider consider. Now, these depend very much on the condition of your suspension. So we'll assume you've got an older car, the mileage is getting up, and the suspension has started to sag. It's not as sharp and effective as the manufacturers originally intended. So I would certainly recommend that you go out and invest in an upgrade to the suspension, because that will dramatically improve the handling. Now, don't make the mistake of slamming the car as low as possible and going with the hardest springs you can, because that's going to be detrimental to the handling. This is a daily driven car. You still want some comfort. So in most cases, a set of coilovers will allow you to adjust the ride height. You can get a good compromise between comfort by setting the ride height so you get a decent amount of cushioning, but also to tighten it up so you get minimal roll when you're actually cornering or under heavy cornering. So getting a decent suspension setup, but more importantly probably, is getting the alignment of the wheels set up correctly, can dramatically improve the handling of the car. Now, for most daily driven cars, you think about upgrading components when they start to wear out. So would I recommend brake upgrades? Well, for a daily driven car, it's not going to make much difference. You're not at that limit where the brakes are constantly running hot. They're getting outside of their threshold of being able to provide decent stopping power. So just changing the pads can make a decent difference to most drivers, most situations. Getting a low dust brake pad set can reduce the amount of time that you spend cleaning a car and minimizing the amount of dust that builds up on those alloy wheels or alloy rims that you're so proud of. And a decent set of pads can actually improve the stopping distance, assuming that your old pads are worn and not biting as effectively. But again, don't go for race pads that will only work when they get hot, because that could be detrimental to your performance on your everyday driven car. So that's pretty much it really. If I had a daily driven car, I would just look at getting it remapped, getting the computer in the car tuned, getting a decent set of tyres, and looking at the suspension and maybe upgrading the brake pads. I don't feel you need to do very much more to get more enjoyment out of your daily driven car. Most of the other mods that we talk about on our channel is really taking the car up to the next level. So just think of these as stage 1 mods, mods that can be done in isolation. They don't require any other adjustments. I've not mentioned air intakes and exhausts, basically because at this stage you're not usually going to see very much of a performance gain. So on a turbo engine, changing the exhaust and changing the intake, you may see 5 to 7% more power at the top end. But looking at the cost of that and the extra noise that you're going to get from the exhaust or from the intake will affect your enjoyment of the car as a daily driver. Now, I say that based on the comments that we've had from people that have fitted these induction kits, and they find the noise of the induction roar intrusive when they're driving the car, or the exhaust becomes rather drony on those long distance drives. So just taking into account the inconvenience that these things give you, the cost of them, and the relatively low performance benefits that you get on most engines, I certainly wouldn't recommend these on a daily driven car. But they can make good upgrades if you start hitting a restriction. If you've done other mods and you're making substantial changes to the power, it would alter my priorities, and I would certainly feel it is worth investing in those components. So thanks for watching. Please boop that like button, because that really does help us to get out there. And to avoid missing out on the great content that we've got planned over the following months and through the rest of this year, please subscribe to the channel, because we would love you to stay tuned. And I'll see you in this next video that I've lined up. Thanks for watching.